But anyway, we can switch to English, because we're just talking about what are we gonna talk about today. And last time we discussed this idea of pattern recognition and pattern creation, and you can maybe introduce it, or you can remind me of what that was, what we talked about the other day.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's interesting also from Tony Robbins. I heard it the first time that I mean, a lot of things in life, it's like it happens in pattern. Like if you want to make money, there are certain patterns that if you just go with it, you can make money everywhere. And that's also with success. That's also with relationships. And Tony Robbins also said that he studied people that they are good at what they are doing and he just somehow like could see or just could realize the patterns they are working with and then the next stage is maybe that you also create the patterns for yourself from your experiences and you try to like implement it in your life. But of course, we would like to speak about or talk about the patterns with tennis, probably,
Mhm.
and also maybe to go deeper a little bit, maybe patterns in tactical uh, like stuff, or maybe technical also, and patterns maybe in yeah different yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember now. Yeah, the I think Tony talks about the three. I think he puts it into three levels, right? So there's the first one is pattern recognition, that you recognize what the pattern is, and like you said, whether it's in the business, in the relationship, and whatever, and in tennis. And then it was pattern utilization, that are you able to then use the pattern to work for you? And then it was pattern creation, where you have enough experience where you start making your own patterns and creating new patterns and being creative with that. And I think that's important. And I don't know, we can just free flow. The thought that comes to my mind with that is one of the things is how there's kind of a hierarchy. Like even in this, there's like a one, two, three process, and you can't really jump ahead, because what I see a lot of times today is that there's this feeling of like I want to jump ahead, I want to create my own patterns without before recognizing patterns and utilizing patterns. That I see this almost disrespect, or that we see in society in general, this kind of there's no as much respect for the elders, for the previous generation, for the history, for all
Yeah.
the know-how that's there, that we see young players kind of being more like, okay, I know, like I just know. And it's not just in tennis, that's just in all areas, right? And it's to the detriment, because we also see that a lot of young people are struggling in different areas of life today. So clearly they haven't recognized patterns or utilized patterns in the right way. And also I think it's happening because um, I think it's happening because of how, nowadays there's this a lot of kind of anti-system and all that mentality, right? But we don't have to go that much into that now. I think what I thought of was I saw an article I want to talk to you about, and I want to hear what you think, and we can expand on that. I saw an article about Roger, and not just about Roger. I think it was like a development of tennis. And it was interesting how they talked about how technology, especially like the racket frames and the strings, how it changed tennis over the years. So how, the old school way was basically, everybody playing chip in charge and coming to net, and that was the game was like get to the net and finish at the net. As you know, whoever like gets to the net first is like has a higher chance of, winning the point. And that's one of the patterns we can discuss maybe because what it talked about was because why was that? Because the idea was if I get to the net, I have the angles. I'm able to open the court, make the opponent run more. And then it talked about how with technology, with better frames, and especially with better strings and better materials, the players started being able to generate much more spin, and especially also bigger racket heads. The players started having much better control on the return of serve and on having much more spin, which especially the spin part allowed the players to be able to hit angles even from the back of the court because they're able to generate so much spin that the ball can drop, short enough hitting cross court that suddenly and that's where the baseline game kind of developed, and suddenly no one was coming to the net because they could just get past easily with an angle or with a topspin lob. And suddenly we had the era of like Agassi style playing, and like the newer era where also that was kind of like the young Roger era, but the article talked about exactly how Roger was the embodiment, and he was like a prototype of the tennis that's being played today. That he's actually that's why he had so much success. He talks about that's why he had so much success because he played already then the tennis that's being played nowadays. That he was so much ahead of his time, where he was playing the all court tennis that we see now, when people are basically doing everything that they can hit from the back of the court, but they're also utilizing drop shots and slices and coming to the net, and it's still developing and developing, like we see with Alcaraz now hitting drop shots from the baseline, which or even behind the baseline, which we never seen before somebody do successfully or even try to go for. So it kind of shows that the it's interesting how the technology plays a part in that and how these kind of patterns develop. So I'll let you I don't know, I'll let you.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was interesting. Or the most important thing I think with the Rogers game was that, like you said, he didn't have any weakness, and that was kind of strange because I remember when Sampras he didn't have that good of a backhand. He couldn't play on the clay, and he was the best in winning Grand Slams, 14 Grand Slams. And then Agassi, he couldn't maybe serve that well, also not playing that good on the clay, maybe. And several other players also. Stefan Edberg was good serve and volley, and also, but not that good from the back. So everybody has something, some weaknesses. But then came Roger, almost without the weakness, maybe only after Nadal came, then with the high spin to his backhand. But until then, he was just dominating the game, and everybody could see like, okay, it's not like it's okay to have a weakness. It's not okay. It's not okay, or it's possible to play without weaknesses because we saw it in Roger somehow. So that was kind of interesting for me.
And I think with the topic of weaknesses and strength, I thought of this interview I was watching that we talked about, before we started recording, um, about this. There's this the Slovakian rapper that it was having the conversation. I liked that the question that was asked was, do you prefer working on your strengths or on your weaknesses? I don't really remember, but he said if you want to achieve something out there in the world and have success, you need to work on your strengths. And if you want to have an inner peace and inner balance, you have to work on the weaknesses.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
That's something that hit me because I think that's a very good question, and that's a very common kind of topic of like what do you whether consciously or unconsciously, people debate that. You see some coaches take the player and work on the strengths, but I would say probably high percentage of coaches more likely they take a player work on the weaknesses. Like we as
Mm,
humans, we as humans, I think we have a tendency to focus more on the pain, which makes sense because biologically speaking, pain is more urgent to resolve because if you don't resolve the pain, well, like, evolutionary speaking, you might die. So that's why the pain has the pain is much more in our face and we want to fix it. So, and I think that's why most people have a tendency to focus on what's not so good. So, but it was interesting because when you talk about Roger, I feel like I want to say because you said he didn't have really any weaknesses, but I think more importantly, just like, my expert there said, he also had a big strengths because he wasn't winning because he didn't have weaknesses. Like he was winning with his strengths. And the other shots were just good enough to where he was able to use the other shots to set up his strengths.
yeah.
Um, so I think that's a more accurate way I would say it is that
Mm,
he was so successful because he had huge strengths, especially the on the run forehand and the serve, the accuracy and the diversity, the variety he had on serve. He had like no one else. And the serve that was so hard to read. So he was able to set up that forehand so well with his serve and put so much pressure on the opponent's serve and service games. So I think he was winning because of the strengths, but and he wasn't losing because of the not having so many weaknesses, let's say.
mm, mm. Yeah. Mm. It's interesting. Darren Cahill would say that the best forehand on the round was Sampras, and the best forehand inside out was Federer's.
Yeah. Which actually kind of makes sense why maybe Federer had more success, right? Because the inside out forehands usually to the backhand of the opponent. So
Mm.
so his biggest strength was to do, 99% of opponents usually weaker side except Nadal, as you said. That's why it was so amazing the rivalry and why it was so entertaining for us to watch because suddenly Nadal came who the Federer's biggest strength was into Nadal's biggest strength.
Yeah.
Um,
And you started with the article and you wanted to continue with it, or what was you saying?
no, I just put it out there because I wanted to hear kind of because you I think you kind of like went through those changes a little bit like as you played also,
Yeah.
like you I think lived through it more than me because I think I'm trying to think, but I think since I was like a junior and to now, I feel like there hasn't been that much change, or there has, but it's not so radical compared to probably what it was for you, like starting as a kid and then playing as an adult. So maybe you can talk about that or how that changed for you or how did
Yeah.
how
I
did you
mean,
how did you see that affect the game?
yeah. I mean, I also wouldn't say because, as you said, the biggest difference was with the rackets to go from the wooden rackets to the normal rackets, and then it was with the strings. But when I started or when I was playing professional, the strings were already there was the Luxilon string who
Okay.
everybody was talking about because Querten started to play with the Luxilon string, so we all started to use it and you somehow go with everybody. And also in my time, I also played a lot of matches, but I can count on two hands when I play against someone who was playing surf and volley, you know. So it wasn't that much of a difference. But maybe more nowadays. I heard a lot of people talking about the quality of the balls, and also maybe that they try to make the tennis slower and slower. I remember when there was time when it was very slow, and then when it was just lightning fast. When Becker and Ivanisevic was playing, you couldn't watch it because they were just aces and holding serves and no rallies at all. Also with Sampras, and then they started to make the slower surfaces, maybe slower balls. And nowadays, I heard now there was again the dinner with James Blake, and there was Medvedev, Kuerten, and Dimitrov, and they were talking about that there was a petition of ATP players that instead of the ball change to make the ball change instead of five, the 7-9 is nowadays on the ATP tour. They wanted to make it 5-7 after 5 games to switch the balls again because and I heard Zverev and also Medvedev talking about the quality of the balls after the virus, that it went down and drastically, and now everybody can stay in the rally. I also heard Taylor Fritz talking about that, and that I believe it changes tennis, and I could even see it on the tournament here in Slovakia where I go with my son, and we always used to play, or there is a lot of years already we are playing with Dunlop Ford balls, and so because we play so many years, we can say that we know the balls and how they behave. And now there is there came such a low quality of the balls that usually always when my players they open up the whole box of the 72 balls and we put it into the basket. First two, three, four practices, it was almost unplayable because the ball is flying everywhere and you have to really have a good technique then, and every mistake shows. But nowadays, I play with a not very good player. He came with the new basket of new balls, and we just play just normal. And I'm like wondering, I cannot make mistakes with the new balls, like brand new balls.
Mm.
So that's also kind of strange, and that I also believe can affect tennis a lot.
Mm. And also, I guess makes sense why then we see also tennis being much more variety of what I was saying about the drop shots and the slices
Yeah,
and coming to the net and all this. I guess that makes sense. That creates makes tennis much more squash like,
yeah, yeah,
that you have or paddle or something. You have these long
yeah,
rallies, which
exactly.
which I mean makes sense why they want to do it, right? Because it's better for the audiences and to make it more attractive, I guess, and to
Mm,
have more attractive rallies. But obviously it makes it much harder on the players, like physically. Like physically, it's becoming more and more physical, the game.
exactly.
And again, like it's kind of like the topic we're talking about, right? Like recognizing patterns. And a good friend of mine once told me that the tough thing about training like a junior player for tennis is that you're training them for tennis that's going to be played 10 years from now.
Mm,
So it's kind of like the same problem we have in schools and education, which is, I mean, a much bigger problem, which is like you're learning stuff that might not be as applicable
yeah,
when you get out of school because it's just outdated. So the question there is then what do you teach? And I guess the answer is, and what I can think of right now is kind of what we talked about in other episodes also is you have to teach adaptability. You know,
exactly.
you have to teach them how to think and how to understand the fundamentals because at the end of the day, going back to how we started, that there needs to be that respect for the history and for the hierarchy and for what's come before because that's where things come out of. So if you don't know your history, you will also not understand the present because you don't know where it's coming from, and it's harder to then to know the future. And a lot of things are also cyclical. Um, so we might come back to the point where it's gonna be, maybe we're gonna come back to the point where it's gonna be again chip in charge because maybe the balls will get, so slow and the rackets will be so accurate that it's gonna be easy actually to return and come to the net right away and and
Like in pickleball.
yeah, and have enough time to just get the ball and not get past so easily. I don't know.
Mhm.
But yeah, the adaptability, and that's why I was talking about the article, like to understand the history. Because one of the patterns that I mentioned already that we can talk about like tactically is the angles, which that's why I mentioned the article because it showed how the game changed, and the main thing in the game was the spin, but the spin allowing for the angles to be played. And I see so often players playing that are not utilizing or not using angles, or they're not training the angles to be played to open the court properly. They can play cross court in the rally, but the cross court is kind of just cross court. It's not an angle cross court, so the ball is crossing the baseline. It's not crossing the singles line, as after the bounce. It's not going off the court. Um, so that's kind of one of the patterns I see, that differentiates like kind of like a basic player from a better player. How much can you open the court and actually do you have angles? Can you play angles?
Yeah. And yeah, it's also interesting how like you also a lot of times you said that if we're talking about any of the problems, then you go, okay, it's like we always said, it's human first, then male or female, and then and that's also a pattern. That's like a big pattern. Then we can come to the smaller and smaller and smaller, but there is also pattern on every level. It's like when we have a tennis player and you look at him and you try to check how is it technique, how he's tactically, how he's emotionally, maybe physically, and you also like from your pattern and understanding you evaluate the player. Or also when I have my player which I know a lot, I know that okay, and also to put it to him in the simple words. Okay, so tennis is just maybe two things we have to work on. First is strokes, and the other thing is game. And okay, now it's like this. The strokes are good, but the game part is not that good. Or it's the other way around. So we know where we are and what we should work on. And then okay, the strokes, it's not just one stroke, but okay, four is okay, but one is not that good. And one is not that good. Why? Maybe it's technical, maybe it's more also with the movement and whatever. So I mean you can go from up to down to the patterns recognition, and that's what's interesting, and that's what's like tell me your patterns and I tell you how good of a coach you are or a tennis player you are, like it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's patterns are basically another word is like habits.
Mm,
It's like I think we don't think about it like that often, but there's actually a synonym. It's like patterns are something that's habitually repeating. And that's why you said like tell me your patterns, I'll tell you how good of a coach you are. It's exactly the same saying is like tell me your habits and I'll tell you how you live. And what
mm,
or what results you're getting because as the famous quote, I forget who it was. I'm sure you heard it, is the famous quote that says that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an action, but a habit.
mhm. Yeah.
So, and I think what Tony Robbins does really well, there's this word it's like he conceptualizes things well, like conceptualizations of a topic, which means
Yeah.
again, it's kind of because what is pattern recognition, just like you said, is basically being able to create categories or create boxes that
Yeah.
we can kind of take all of life, which is kind of all complicated, and it looks complicated because there's so many things happening. Like in each moment, there's a million things that are happening, and we can break it down. We can break it down to manageable units. And we're still not gonna encompass everything, obviously, but at least we're getting a conscious like idea of like, okay, what are the puzzle pieces, which then help us to kind of see how they interact together. And then they also help us see and also just help us plan, like because as another great saying goes, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So, but you can't plan if you don't have a concept, you don't have a system. You can only make a system if you have those pieces of what you're making the system out of, so
Yes.
and I think that's why, again, going back, we have to go back to history or go back to actually studying. That's why education is so important because a lot of the systems have already been done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just maybe have to upgrade the wheel. Like that's we are realizing with new science and new ideas and all this that okay, some things are outdated or need to be changed. But it's more like it's like taking an old car and giving it a tune-up and changing some things, adding some things, but it's still a car. Like the primary patterns are still the same. It's like a wheel has been around for millions, like thousands of years. We still haven't come up with anything better than a wheel for a car. So I think the conceptualization, that's what Tony's very good at, and putting things into words and into categories, and thinking about it that way. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, whether you're a parent or a coach or whoever, if you get it right or wrong. I don't think it's not that important, or what words you use or what categories you pick. I don't think it's that important. It's more important that you have some some kind of system. Doesn't matter what it is, because if you have some kind of system, at least you can start recognizing like, okay, it doesn't make sense. Is it more? You can start developing it. You can start making it better. You can start making it. So whatever it is, there needs to be at least some kind of system, even if it's as simple as, there is tennis training, there is conditioning training, and there is rest.
All right.
That's the simplest kind of way we can like that's the kind of the lowest resolution uh breakdown we can make. There's tennis training, and then there's tournaments. So we have already four boxes which you can then take and you can put into a calendar of like, and then you can look at, and once you can look at percentages. Okay, from all my training, what percentage is tennis, what percentage is conditioning, and what percentage is rest, and what percentage is tournaments. And then from that, you can very easily see why things are happening as they're happening. Somebody clearly doesn't have tournament experience, and then you can look and you can see why, because tournament percentage is 10% of all their tennis thing. Somebody is maybe too tight and cannot swing, or is like, and because maybe they're overtrained, because you see that the rest is like very little compared to the other things, etc. Someone's maybe is very good technically because they have so many trainings, or maybe they just have individual trainings, but they don't have, somebody doesn't do any conditioning or physical preparedness, so they're, so even that's like a simple pattern or breakdown one can make, and but few people do. Um, Myself included many times, like so many times I get, and it's so easy, right? Because it's so easy to get lost in the flow of day to day, and you just go to training and you leave, and then and because then you make a system, but then it breaks down because life happens. And so then it makes you feel like, okay, fine, so there's no point having a system because it's not going to be like that anyway.
Mm.
And that's probably why most people don't have it, because even if they try to have something, then it just doesn't go that way anyway. But it's still better to have something, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and also at least you have something like you said, maybe some parts of the training, like okay, this is tennis, this is tournament, this is conditioning, and then like we were talking before, maybe you know somebody who has a good patterns in his field. Maybe it's a conditions trainer, maybe it's a tennis coach, maybe is a good somebody who can plan things, and you can again use their knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's also a pattern. Or we use their parents to your, and then you realize, okay, there's another pattern. I cannot live for 300 years, but I can have the experiences of people who together have the experiences of 300 years because they lived with in their field and they become the masters in their field, so you can utilize it, and then it goes and it, yeah,
Mhm.
everything goes up.
That's true, but I think the problem in nowadays is that we live in a world of there's like too much information.
Mm,
So because somebody takes like something like I said now, for example, but then you open Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and then somebody has a different way to break down the
yeah.
things. And then you open and somebody else a different way, and then they say like this way sucks and my way is the best and whatever, you know. So I think there's too much kind of information out there, and that brings me back again to studying and to look at history because the more you understand the fundamentals, that's kind of why I go back to, like the example I always use, like that's the example, like we're human and then we're man and woman, and these are fundamentals. So the more fundamental you go, the the more the more you understand the basics and the fundamentals, it helps you then because then all the information that's out there, you can put it in the right box. So if that
Mm,
makes sense, you can kind of understand that it's the same thing, just maybe packaged differently. Because that's what we
mm,
see so many times nowadays. But if you don't know, then you get caught by how charismatic the speaker is, or it's a cool name, or who they worked with, or whatever, or what results they had, and now it's like they're selling this thing, or and it gets confusing because everybody looks like an expert or like it all looks great. So I think that's another problem. It's kind of the over too much information and too much complexity, therefore. And
mm,
like Tony says, complexity is the enemy of execution. So,
mm,
so the more complex you make it, the more ideas you have, the higher chance that you're not going to do anything because it's just you get lost. Um,
mm,
so the way kind of I look at patterns, I kind of love the line from Elon Musk as a fun line. He says the only laws, yeah, uh the only laws are the laws of physics. Everything else is a recommendation.
mm,
And I love that because again, going to the fundamentals, the most fundamental way of understanding the world we have is physics. Or you could say it's mathematics. Yeah, and then you go from there. We have from mathematics come physics, and from physics comes chemistry, and then from chemistry comes biology, and then from biology, and then we branch out into comes physiology and psychology and philosophy and all the different humanitarian aspects, etc. So and that's why we go back to when we look at physics as a fundamental, and we apply it to tennis. Then again, we go back to what I was talking about earlier. What are the patterns? Okay, the court is a certain size. The racket has certain properties. The strings have certain properties. You can create some kind of spin on the ball, which when you create spin, you create some kind of trajectory, some kind of arc with the ball. There's different speed. There's all physics, and then you can start thinking about it clearly as like, okay, I have this size chord. I can have different loops, different speeds, different trajectories. I have a net there, which I have to avoid. So what do I do? And if you just start thinking about that simply, somebody who doesn't know anything about tennis and but understands that there's geometry and looks at it from mathematics, just it's just geometry, okay? And these are the properties of these are the different things I can do. So you don't have to actually. That's why really, really smart people, I think, come from that. The people who can understand very quickly even different fields, that they are new to a field and they can understand it really quickly because they have understanding at these fundamental levels of how things work. So they can very quickly map and kind of attach the new thing to where it comes from because they understand the basics.
Mm.
So so that's why I go back to the point that we have to have the education and the kind of go back to the history and see kind of the basic fundamentals. And what are the fundamentals? Always go back to the simplicity. And in my view, the fundamentals of tennis are number one, you can't hit in the net. And number two, you can't hit out. Um, and if you think about it, tennis is kind of simple in that way, that there's not that many rules. You only have two rules, basically. You can't hit the net and you can't hit out.
Mm.
And you have to hit it with the racket, the ball. Okay. That's basically that's tennis. Those are the rules. Um, so if you look at that like that, then we have to say, okay, the first step for me is we have to get the ball over the net. So first step for me when I work with people is like, okay, get it high over the net somehow. And then second step, we can hit out, so don't hit close to the lines. And it sounds simple, but yet, as you and I both know, how many junior young players you see that are hitting low over the net and close to the lines.
Mm.
I see most of them, but the reason is because they go in it with the wrong understanding. They think they have to hit a winner. They think that the game is about, which makes sense because on the first look, when you first look at the game and you don't understand the game, it looks like, okay, my job is to hit the ball in a way that the other person can get to it. And actually, as kids, and I think that's where the development happens. I think as kids, it actually happens much more often because kids are small and they're like the court's pretty big. So and this is where we go also into the conversation of why it's good for kids to start on smaller courts that fit their size, no big courts, so they actually learn the game fitted to them. Because if you start on a bigger court, then what happens to you is like you can hit the ball easily to where you hit a winner, and then you learn that like, okay, that's the game, or you look at someone playing and who can't play, and it's easy to hit winner on someone who can't play. But then you get into people who can play and you realize it's not about winners at all. It's about forced errors, unforced errors. And again, that's another pattern, right? Like what's the three ways the point can end? Forced errors, unforced errors, or winners. And most people are like I know, like a lot of people are going for winners. That's why they're hitting low over the net and close to the line because they want to hit fast, straight, and away from the person. And yet they're not respecting the most fundamental rules of tennis. You can't hit in the net and you can't hit out. So you don't want to play close to the edge because you're gonna get burned. Um, so for me, I mean, I would love for you to elaborate on any of this, and you can go probably deeper into what tactically and what are the other fundamentals. But for me, these are kind of the basic fundamentals of tennis,
Mm,
the patterns, since we're talking about patterns.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting, and it's also like I don't know if we were talking about it last time, but I was trying to also explain to my players also the pattern or the different levels of the tactical side, or how I somehow during my 40 years, I realized how I understood the tactical side of tennis. It was like, and I was trying to also put it into the patterns, so into the three, four groups. It was like kindergarten, then the normal school, then the high school, and then the university. And that's also a pattern. And if you just explain it like this to your player, they can also grab it or somehow a little bit understand. And I was explaining that the kindergarten is like, okay, we just play, and I don't know what we play. We just played, and the ball came, and I play somewhere, and we just count. We just playing and counting, I would say. And it's just the kindergarten. There's no plan. We just play how it comes. And then the second then the normal school is like, okay, maybe we already have the plan A, plan B, and the plan A it's most probably okay. I go for the winners. I play fast, and I'm the one who is aggressive. And when I do a lot of mistakes, or when the score shows that it's not good enough, then I go into the pusher. Maybe it's on edge, I just push it back. And then maybe on the high school or gymnasium or in Slovakia, it's like, okay, you already know a little bit of the geometry of the court. Maybe you already know also how to take also the time of the opponent, or just create the time. You know how to go maybe more inside the court to create the angles you were talking about. And you already know maybe what's the weaknesses and strengths, your own or your opponent. And that's probably how I understand how my pattern works. That's maybe the high school. And then the university is maybe probably, or in my understanding, it's like, okay, you just figure out it on the spot. Like, maybe if you watch the player before, you know what you can expect, but you also understand that you never know how you're gonna feel tomorrow, how fast you're gonna be tomorrow. You
Mhm.
never know how the opponent's tactic is going to be. If
Mhm.
he just somehow suddenly, like Medvedev, starts to play super aggressive because that's his tactic, and you never know. You never know how the weather is going to be like tomorrow. You never know how the ball is going to fly. Like we also hear some people saying that the center court is much faster than the court we were playing yesterday. So you never know how the court may fast may be. So there are so many unknowns. So you just try to figure out it after the two, three, four, five, 6 games, and you try to be very aware what is working, what is not, and then that's already, I believe, the highest level of the tactic. And that's also, again, pattern, tactical pattern. And we can, I mean, yeah, like we go down from the from the big picture to the smallest patterns they are.
Yeah, almost I kind of think of it like a tree, right? Like you kind of
Yeah.
have it's very similar, right? Like the tree is growing, and at first it's just like a one stick, like the stem. And
Right.
then you have just like maybe like a one little branch with one leaf. and then as it's growing, it's getting more branches, and each branch is stemming into different, things and things and things. And then the pros, the high level is that I have so many different branches and different leaves, and every leaf is, like you said, a different factor, whether it's like how I'm feeling today, what the court's like, what balls are there, what's the wind, what's the whatever, how I'm physically doing, how I'm mentally doing, how or even like every leaf is maybe like each point is different, you know.
Mm.
And I think the mastery of a specific tree, let's say, of a specific topic, is that are you able to, and I think this is where I go back to the education and fundamentals, are you able to move up and down the hierarchy of abstraction? So basically, down here, let's say, or up here, let's say, since I'm using the tree example. So up here, you have the most concrete. So the most concrete is that I can't make a serve. And I'm pissed off because my first serve is going in the net right now. So that's kind of the most concrete. And then can you abstract out like from that? And how much can you abstract out to see where that's coming from? What's the where it stems? That's why in English we say it stems, because just like a tree, it has a stem. So where's the root? And that's why we use the word root, So um it's no coincidence I thought of a tree, I guess. But so where's the root of the problem? And then you can have it in a specific moment like that, and then you can also abstract it out, like I was using the example before of like there's not enough rest or not enough tournament or something, because you can abstract out and see the big picture kind of and look at it from the roots. But I see, and the skill is, I think, to be able to move between, because there's people who are very good at kind of being in the present moment and being right there and being very like, this is the problem we're solving, and being very practical. And then there's on the other extreme people who are very abstract, who can kind of see the big picture very well and conceptualize, but not very good at like going in there and actually like solving the leaf.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's that ability to flow between the two and connect the two and bring theory into practice when we are stuck in practice. And it's something we talked about the other day, like when should you this idea of kind of, I love this idea of an hourglass. So it's kind of like this. So you kind of, you start focusing on something, and then if you get stuck, that's when you should brainstorm. That's why you need to go into theory. But once you figure it out, you can't stay stuck there. You have to like bring the theory back to the concrete topic and move on because you figured it out, and move on until you get stuck again. And then you again go wide to the roots and see what's happening. It's kind of like you don't want to be, you can't be driving a car and fixing the engine at the same time.
Mm.
Um, but I think that's the mastery, being able to do that really fast, and that's the university level. That's what the pros, the best, can do almost instantaneously, can like calculate and recognize like this is why I'm stuck, this is the problem, this is where it's stemming from, this is how I can fix it. Let's go and put it straight into practice.
Yeah.
Um, but I like the analogy you made of the different schools. And I think, and I remember when you were telling me about it first time, I told you you're being very gracious with the
Mm.
analogy, because I feel like many people, it's kind of like we talked about on the last episode, like I was talking there more like emotionally speaking, people get stuck in the emotional development. So I think also here that people get stuck in the tennis development on some level, or they skip a level. You see this with players who started late, or maybe they were injured at some point, like they had like a long-term injury and they like skipped one of the school grades, and suddenly they're missing the skill. They're missing the skill that was taught in that grade,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, so you see that also, and then you can also see that I see that a lot with when you like play a player who's like even like me is like or like who's like an adult, but you can tell when they stopped tennis by the way they play. It's so
Mm-hmm.
interesting. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm. I know, I know.
Like it doesn't matter how old they are, you can see like this guy played until he was 12. This guy played until he was 16. This guy played until he was 18. This guy played until he was this guy actually played some qualies of futures and this guy actually
Mm-hmm.
played some even challengers. And it doesn't matter if they haven't played for 5 years or 10 years or whatever, you can see kind of the level of education they got.
Yeah. 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 And that's kind of interesting. Like, I mean, you reminded me, I mean, of the feeling like I always had when I was playing against opponents that they were young, but
Mhm.
coming up, and you just knew that you play 18-year-old guy named Gulbis or Gaske. And now the names are big, but at that time nobody knew them. Maybe they were good juniors. And maybe Gasket he was already star when he was 17, but Gulbis or Sorenling or Berdych, they were like you could feel they are so special, and you could feel their not only the strokes, but the level of the understanding, the behaving on the court that you just, I almost, I almost always knew that even when I lost or I beat that guy, that this guy is gonna be so good that it's just amazing. You could feel it. That's interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. I wonder why that is. I wonder if it's something that's natural or if it's something that they it's hard to say, right? It's probably I mean, I guess it just depends, different factors. Maybe they also had a good coach or something. It's always a combination of
Yeah, probably.
but how much they made the understand. I saw actually when you saying I saw just a few days ago here in Athens, I saw a guy play who was like number two in Greece in like under 14s and also under 16s. And I saw him play, and actually I didn't like I saw him play, but when I came to the courts, they were like they're not playing, they're just talking there. And someone told me like this guy was number two and etc. And immediately, and again, we're talking about patterns. Immediately I said to the coach I was talking to, I was like, he must be smart, right? And he was like, yeah. And I could see that he they understand like how do I know? And then because I haven't even seen him play, but I it's one of those things that you can see a person kind of like how much they're in their like how much they're thinking. And also the other thing was I told him, well, clearly I can see his body that he's not like some athletic specimen, that he's not like some crazy athlete. So if he's not a crazy athlete and you tell him, and I know he was number two in the country, then the other thing he probably knows how to think. And then they started playing, and it was clear, it was obvious that this guy just knew. Like first of all, he anticipated so well that he was able to read the game so well, like what the opponent is gonna do from what position, which situation, and therefore he was, even though he wasn't so quick or something, like quicker than anyone else, but he was there so quickly just because he was reading the game better. And then the shot selection, like knowing exactly that, and this guy's like 16 or something, but you can see exactly what you're saying, like the high level thinking to the point of like, I know the guy is approaching the net, so I'm gonna like hit it a little bit slower, low over the net, so he has it like down below, and right after the shot, I'm already going forward. You could see that it's not accidental. Like that's the difference, I think. Like with the other players, they might hit it, once and like make the right shot selections on accident. But with this guy, you could see that it was on purpose. Like
Mm.
he knew exactly what he had to hit to set himself up for the next point, etc. So exactly what we're talking about is the different level of thinking. And then of course the other thing is being able also to hit the shots, right? Because
Mm.
that's where tennis is different from chess, where you it's not just about knowing the right move, but also being able to hit it. I mean, I think this is where chess. Right? I'm talking about chess. What you said about how in modern times how it's interesting how the young players are coming up because I heard I think it was Magnus Carlsen, the chess champion, was talking about how like nowadays it's crazy because the young kids, because of technology, they can watch all the games and they can and now they have also the technology of the simulators and they can play against and see the computer what decisions they would make and have these different things. So the learning so much faster because the like when they were growing up, they couldn't they only saw the greats at tournaments live if they got there, but or on TV sometimes. But now it's like any kid can pull up any YouTube or whatever and like study the best. So by the time the kids come, they might not have experience like practically, but the knowledge is almost the same level because they already studied it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. Now, also yesterday I saw the Nothing Major podcast with Isner, Jack Sock, Sam Querrey. And Sam Querrey was he gave the question to the other guys that okay, Menchik, 19 years old, beat Novak Djokovic in the final of the Miami Open. Is experience overrated? And they were discussing the experience if it's overrating or it isn't. And he was like, "What is it experience? How should I use the experience?" And he was like, they were kind of funny with it. Yeah.
That's a great question, I think.
Mm,
Is
mm,
experience overrated? I don't know. It's interesting. I think, yeah, I don't think it's overrated, but it's not, especially with something like tennis, that's so physical. Um, and like we said nowadays with the slower balls and everything becoming more and more physical, it becomes, and I think especially the case with Menchik, because I saw the Djokovic interview afterwards and just praising how well he's serving.
mm,
And so I think if you're like a big server, then it kind of simply it's what we're talking about, right? It's going back to the fundamentals. And because then it simplifies the whole thing.
yeah,
You don't need to have so much experience because you're doing the fundamentals right. And it was the same. I just watched on Netflix. I just watched this show, Court of Gold, about the following the USA basketball team, the national team on the Paris Olympics, and not just them, but all different teams. And that was a game, the first game they played against Serbia, which a lot of people were anticipating it was going to be a close game because Serbia had, these great players also. But then Kevin Durant like came on and just went off and just hit everything. And he was saying in the show, he said like, I just kept it simple. Like when I was open, I shoot. When I had two guys on me, I passed the ball. So sometimes I think again going to the fundamentals of like are you doing the fundamentals well? And I think of another example with a great, it's also a basketball coach. I think his name was James Wooden or John Wooden. I'm not sure. Who was one of the best, I believe, college basketball coaches historically, when winning so many national championships in college basketball. And one of his philosophies was like practice the fundamentals every practice. So they would like shoot free throws all the time or they would just do the basic things that are the most boring basic things every practice over and over and over and over again, because his belief was, and it's what we're talking about now, is like if that's where you build from the basic. So if it's Steph Curry, Steph Curry, major superstar. Why? Because he just learned how to throw, the three pointers.
Mm,
And I say just with a quote unquote just because again it goes back to the fact that just people just don't do it because it's boring, because it's like you have to do the same thing over and over and over again. And even when you feel like I'm so good at it, and then you keep going.
mm,
Um, so I think one of the patterns we see that's there with great achievers is that they're able to do the boring things. I would say they're able to do the fundamentals. Um, they recognize the patterns, and then they utilize the patterns, and then they practice those. And that's why they can utilize the patterns better than anyone else, because they practice the basics all the time. Um, and I think it's the ego of humans that kind of is pushing us to like wanting to already, create our own patterns and do something special and do something extraordinary. Um, and we shoot ourselves in the foot because we're trying to do something special and yet like don't have the fundamentals in place.
mm. Yeah, and it's also interesting. I mean, when you like working as a coach or as a, I don't know, as a life coach, that okay, the one thing is to have the patterns, and the other thing is to use the patterns, or maybe to teach the patterns to your clients, or just to use your patterns, and maybe just to make them understand what is happening. It's like I remember, like, you helped me a lot with the patterns, like the father and son energy, or the masculine and the feminine, or the family energy, how it should work. And when I understood it, then it helped me tremendously.
Mm.
And like, it's interesting. I mean, the I mean, one thing is to probably, the question maybe is like how to create your own patterns, or it takes time, it takes experience, and takes a lot of books, like you said, and also to have the skill to like it, you hear the problem, and you just realize, okay, this is it, or it's come from this pattern, and here is the thing, so I can like give it to them or teach them. That's also interesting. Yeah, so I'm just thinking.
Yeah, no, it goes back to the user example. Yeah, I conceptualize it for you. Like
Yeah,
I put it into a graspable
yeah,
way.
yeah,
Because I think that's where like life coaching and these things, the way I look at like life coaching and mentoring and just coaching in general, I think the role of a coach or a mentor is that you take the person from disempowerment or helplessness to empowerment.
yeah,
So you help them, give them tools or insights or way of looking at things or whatever that take them from, again, using the tree metaphor, like there's this leaf, there's this thing happening to me, and I don't know, to, oh, I see the tree. I understand how it's connected on a deeper level,
yeah,
you know? And again, to use your example, is like we're talking about something that was very tennis specific, and then again, I have to go back to the we're first human and man and woman, etc. Because what happened was we solved the deeper problem, or the deeper, like the more closer to the root, and then everything above that is gonna get solved.
Hmm.
Right. So if you're trying to solve at the leaf the problem that's at the root, it's you're gonna be struggling,
Mm.
you know. But that's where again, we have to be multidimensional, or better yet, kind of again, go see the big picture, go see the roots. Like again, going back to education, looking at the fact that tennis, what is tennis? Tennis is sport, which means it's part of, it includes people, and it literally is about people. It's a humanistic endeavor. It's a person. A player is a person. So because it's a person, it fits into mostly it fits into biology, And so when you look at a problem with the person, gonna fit into biology and chemistry, and and psychology and physiology and philosophy. That's where so if you understand the basic fundamentals and theories in these topics, you can probably see what the roots are of different problems. Then if you look at, for example, like we said before, you look at tactics, that's not a person, that's a court and a ball and a racket. There we look at physics. So you got to understand more, like there is speed and there's angles and there's the mass and all that. So if you understand that, the more fun then you can, so again, we solve the problem at a deeper level. So then it gets solved, but yeah. You know what I would like? I was talking to someone the other day, and I was saying it would be so cool if what I would like is if tennis had like the belt like they have in martial arts. Because what I love in martial arts, how they have, that you're a white belt and then you're, I don't know exactly how it goes, whatever, and then you get to the black belt, because there's very clearly identified what you talked about, like who is in which school. There's a clear distinction, and there's a respect that goes along with that, because you know that if you're white belt, you don't question the higher belt or the black belt, because you don't have any patterns yet. You're just downloading patterns. So your job is to just be there more than anybody else. Just put time in. I'm not saying to like not think, but like, and of course at the end of the day, like everywhere else, it depends on who is the sensei, like how wise and how enlightened is the master of the whole school, because from there the whole culture will develop, and who is promoted and etc. So yes, there can be also bad patterns, but not really in a way that, because a lot of times the belts are awarded by like, okay, are you consistently beating the people around you, and that's when you move up, or are you consistently like training, or you figured out these skills that you're proficient in, these specific skills that we know at this level you need to complete, and then you move to the next level. um but I think there's something cool about that clarity there, because there's like a much clearer, because it's much more skill based. It's not so much like in tennis we have rankings, but in rankings it's kind of like it's much harder to know like where I am, or where like you can, because you can beat someone one day and the other day you lose against them, and but I mean everybody can kind of feel it, like this person is in a different level or improved, but it's, I don't know how to say it. It's too, no one likes to talk about it too much, it's not as openly accepted that like, okay, now I'm better than you, or like now I'm at a different level, where in the martial arts is like it's yes, now I got awarded this belt and it's okay. And you're a white belt and I'm a different belt and it's just normal part of the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it is interesting, but and maybe if we try it, maybe it's gonna be okay. But I have to tell you, uh, the opposite story, maybe how it used to be in Czechoslovakia when we used to play, and how bad it was because it
Okay.
was like the caste system,
Okay.
and and they still have it in Czech, by the way.
Yeah.
And it was that okay, we were playing tournaments, and then after the whole season, because there was no internet, the points were counted together. Okay, you played okay 20 tournaments, but only the best, I don't know, 10 tournaments were counted, and then there was a ranking. But then there was a like clear pattern, like okay, these five players, they gonna get 60 bonus points. Like these players are 60 bonus points. Then the next five players gonna have 45 bonus points. Then the rest 35 bonus points. And then it was 25, 20, 15, 12, 9, 6, 3. And it was like the cast and bonus points. That's why that all of the tournaments, they were not like it's now that okay, you go to the tournament and it's tournament A, B, C, D, or the juniors are 30, 60, or at the ATP it's 1,000, 500, 250. So you know on which tournaments you go. Then it was like, okay, it's the tournament, and we will see who's gonna come, like the bonus points player. We count together the bonus points, divided the players, and then we're gonna have the category. And the
Mhm.
category was from 1 to 10, let's say. And then when a good a lot of good people came to the tournament. It was good tournament, or you can make a lot of points. But then
Uh,
when it was weak tournament, then and yeah, so it was like this. So it's not, I mean, not bad. But I can remember when I was starting and I was playing under 12, under 14, the 60 bonus points players, they were gods, like nobody could even, like they were not saying hello to you, and also 45 players, they were maybe, like prince, like okay, they can speak to them a little bit, and it was like cast, and when I was like 12 bonus points player, I had my friends around 12, 15, maybe 9, but
mm.
the rest, and it was like tough on the psyche, because when you went to the court against 60 bonus points player, everybody had it in the mind that, oh, I cannot beat this guy, this is God. So it was kind of strange, and I wouldn't want it back, I
I
would say.
see. Well, I think the no, I totally agree. That's yeah. But I think the difference there is that I feel like with the at least again going depends on the teacher of the school or the sensei or how the culture
Right.
is. But in martial arts, I feel like there is that element of you spar with anybody. Like, I mean, mostly you spar with like white belts with white belts, but there is that also you mix much more. And it's kind of, and also it's based more on like meritocracy. So it's like on skills you acquire and stuff. Because I see the problem with what you're saying is then it's kind of the sad part is what we see in the world also. It's kind of like why rich get richer and poor get poorer
Mm,
based on the system, like you're saying, then where the players, the plus 60 bonus would play came, the tournament became like you get a lot of points. So all the tournaments they went to, they could also get a lot of points. So they had a much higher chance to kind of stay up there. And
mm,
so it makes it much and but it's still there if you think about it. If you look at ATP, like it's the same thing. Once you get to a certain point, like you don't have to win qualies anymore. You go straight to the main draw. And doesn't
mm,
matter if it's points wise or money wise, like Like there's that tipping point with every endeavor is like, can you make it? Where do you think that is nowadays in tennis? Like where is that tipping point? Like once you kind of get, or is there one? Once you get after that, like you kind of, it's easier to stay there, or it's easier to kind of um like your life gets easier.
I
You're
mean,
you're not so much struggling, like pushing it
right.
uphill suddenly.
Right. I can only, I mean, reproduce what I hear from the players I know or I just listen to, and they always said like, okay, to have a solid life, you gotta be like around 80 in the world, and to really like get into all of the tournaments, you gotta be top 50 somehow, top 50, top 40 to even get to the biggest tournaments, or maybe the tournaments they are just 32 draw, because paradoxically it's much easier to get into the Grand Slams and Super Nines because the draw is 128 or 96, and it's much tougher to go to the maybe 500s like Dubai or whatever when the draw is 32. So
Mm.
there has to be 32 best players. It's not like 128 best players. So yeah, so but I mean I like the way, but that's a different topic. What Djokovic is doing mostly now with the lawsuit against ATP, but also before, like a lot of years already, that it's just strange or unfortunate that tennis, such a big and broad sport, like from tennis, can make only, they say that men's, women's, and doubles, maybe 400 players can make a good living out of tennis. And that's quite sad because I remember I used to be 5, 6 years around 200, 300, and I was like zero. I didn't make any money, only from the club matches. So, and that's pity because if you are there's if you are a hockey player, full soccer player, whatever, I mean, there are thousands of people making good living out of the sport. But also there are hundreds of other sports that when you're not top 10, you don't make anything. So I mean, we can discuss it like broadly, but tennis, it's, I mean, popular, and probably the ATP or maybe the tournaments, they're making a lot of money, so maybe they can share more. That's what Djokovic is saying. So maybe we'll see. I mean, at least to beat top 500 players in the world, they probably deserve to make more money. Yeah.
Mm. I think it's yeah, this is a topic that's I heard somewhere that it's like a was like a natural law. There's this thing you see that always there's a small percentage of the population makes the biggest amount of money. So it's kind of like I don't know, it's like 1%. There's like, I don't know, if you look at music, like classical music, we know the names. And there's like the 90% of the classical music that's popular has been like composed by maybe like 10 guys,
Yeah.
and then you look at whatever, you look at football goals scored in the league, you see that again, like 80-90% of all the goals scored in that season are scored by 5 guys or 10 guys. So, and I think it was something like a square root. It's basically, and it works like in companies or somewhere also. It was this idea that if you have 100 employees, I think it was a square root. So if you have 100 employees, that means like 10 employees do 50% of the work. So it's the same. Like if you have a group of 10 people, like one person does 50% of the work. If you have 100 employees, 10 employees, Um, so it's an interesting, and we see that in society too. That's just why rich get richer and poor get poorer, and that gap always increases, 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 and it's a pattern. Talking about patterns, we see in history, but it's up to the system then to redistribute the wealth from the top back down. So the wealth kind of circulates, and that's what Djokovic is trying to do. Rightfully so, because what happens is if you don't do that, the system breaks down because you still need like you still need to take care of the people, at the bottom of the hierarchy, because if that falls, then there is no hierarchy. Like in an example of tennis, like if it gets too much to the point where there's not even hope to make money or you can't do anything, then kids will just not want to play tennis, and then you will have no tennis. So because it will just become to the point like I'll just do something else, which is already we see happening now, where most kids just like that's why they are like, hey, I just want to I'll go to school, go to play college tennis in the US, or because I don't think I'm gonna have a life with this. That's why it's put so much pressure, like we talked in that episode, on kids to be, they're at 14, 15 years old, and they're wondering like, can I actually make it in tennis? And they're 14,
Mm.
15 years old. Like, you have time. But I feel like, no, I don't have time because at 18 I have to choose, or 19 if I go to college or go to school and I do something else, because like there's a high chance with tennis I'm not gonna make any money, so I should go do something else.
Mm.
So I think it's definitely a good thing that Djokovic is doing for tennis. Cool. I think we're good for
Yeah,
today.
yeah, good, perfect.
It's a good conversation on patterns and recognizing patterns and I think we can talk probably next time. I would like to kind of pick your brain more about like the tactics and go deeper into kind of what do you see in terms of different strategies and tactics, and we can unpack that a bit more. That'll be interesting for me to hear from you.
Yeah, it was. We can make, like the series, like, okay, maybe pat tac like you said, tactics and patterns in the tactical point of view, and then maybe in the technique and patterns in the technique,
Mhm.
and then maybe also with the movement or stuff. So, I mean, there are, yeah, a lot of things we can do with it.
Yeah, sounds good. All right.
Cool. Okay.
Have a good
Bye.
one. See you.